With critical natural resources becoming harder to get, the issue of where to get them and how to become more energy independent has been at the forefront of American politics. Congressman Pete Stauber of Minnesota represents the district that is home to the Duluth complex, which houses 95% of U.S. nickel reserves and holds an abundance of other natural resources. We sat down with the congressman earlier. Congressman Pete Stauber, thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, it's great to be with you again.
Congressman, when it comes to critical rare earth minerals, why are they so important to our national security?
Well, you look at, we use critical minerals in so many products. They're on our iPhones or iPads or televisions, our defensive weapons. They're used to manufacture medical instruments and supplies. So critical minerals are really a strong foundation, and we need those. We need to secure that supply chain. The United States has to, mine these minerals. These are God-given to us in our earth. We can do it, and we can do it better than anybody, following the best environmental and labor standards.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Do we have the capacity to mine these within the United States? Do we have these?
We have the capacity. We need to have the will. We need to have the political will to do that, and obviously this administration doesn't have the will to do that. We have the labor force able, ready, and willing to mine these critical minerals, yet this administration continues to put up roadblocks and in fact takes permits off the table from companies that have been trying to get permits for years.
Congressman, the Intel community has been raising alarms over China's gradually moving into Africa and taking over a lot of their minerals. Africa is a very mineral-rich continent. Is this something that the U.S., do you think, should be paying closer attention to?
We should be paying very close attention to it, and we should have been paying close attention years ago. The communist country of China has the 100-year initiative, and what they want to do is own these minerals outright, so that other countries across the world will depend on them for these minerals, and we can't do that. It's strategically important for the United States of America to mine these minerals here, manufacture them, and refine them here, so we're not dependent on that foreign adversarial nation.
So today, Russia has cut off natural gas supplies to both Poland and Bulgaria. How might this impact the United States?
Well, I think that we have to look at what Joe Biden did within the first 5 hours of his administration. He killed the Keystone XL pipeline. He stopped permits, oil permits on federal lands. Hasn't put onshore oil lease out. Hasn't put a offshore oil lease out. So we could do better than that. What's happening, and so I think that the focus should be on changing the policy, having the will as the United States of America to be energy dominant. Energy. We talk about energy. There's equity in energy too. There are other nations and allies of ours that, if we can be exporters of energy, we can help them grow and make their economy stronger. And that's one of the goals, as being allies across the nation. But we can't allow Russia to control Europe's energy and oil supplies. That's just, we can't have that, and this administration is allowing it thus far.
Congressman Pete Stauber, thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Biden administration's border policies are under the microscope. DHS Secretary Mayorkas faced a tough line of questioning. He was pressed on how the administration plans to get the border crisis under control. Melina, could you tell us more about this?
Now, just one day before Mayorkas appeared before Congress, he released a plan for how the administration has dealt with the illegal immigration surge. Mayorkas told Congress members today that the DHS has been working to implement this plan for the past year, and that this new document just outlines specifically how the administration is planning to deal with the border crisis moving forward. Let's take a look. The plan has 6 parts. Here are the key pieces. Surging resources to the border like vaccines, transportation, and increasing holding capacity, streamlining processing, increasing use of expedited removal, and working with non-governmental organizations to support illegal immigrants in the U.S. while they are waiting for their court dates. Many Republicans today shot questions at Mayorkas, some even calling for him to resign.
Next year, if we have the majority in this committee, which we shall, you're still in office, you'll face impeachment.
Are you testifying as you sit here today that the southwest border is secure? Yes, I am, and we are continuing to work to make it more secure.
But Mayorkas has acknowledged that a significant increase in migrant encounters will strain our system even further. And that increase is expected after the administration lifts Title 42, a public health policy.
With the Title 42 public health order set to be lifted, we expect migration levels to increase.
And as expected, Mayorkas was pressed on this. He brushed off the question, saying that this decision is in the CDC's hands and that they are vaccinating illegal immigrants.
And we are gearing forward to meet the objective of vaccinating up to 6,000 migrants a day.
Despite the DHS outlining their plan this week for Congress, some House Democrats are still not satisfied.
Now we allow people to come into the country and they go off and we have no idea whether they're ever going to show up in a courtroom again. Right now, Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the White House and have done nothing to get at comprehensive immigration reform.
Melina, the DHS is now trying to pin responsibility on Congress to act. Mayorkas said the immigration system is fundamentally broken and that it's an issue only Congress can fix. You've heard from lawmakers about this. What have they been telling you?
Steve, Republican senators held a press conference today about the border crisis. Now, we did ask them if they do at least agree with the DHS on this point, that Congress should act to reform our immigration system. We asked Senator Portman specifically about this. He told us that Congress can and should take action to reform specifically our asylum and adjudication process. Let's listen.
To provide an immigration adjudication with regard to asylum at the border immediately. And if that person doesn't qualify, and remember 85% roughly of people who go through the system in the end don't qualify, then those people would go back to their country. That would have an immediate deterrent effect.
Now, this proposal is included in a bipartisan bill led by Senator John Cornyn from Texas and Senator Kirsten Sinema from Arizona. But the latest we heard from those senators on that bill is that it's not getting enough congressional leadership's attention to fast track it and potentially sign it into law. So it's unclear if this particular asylum reform would be something that Congress could pass anytime soon. Steve, back to you.
And Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he will address the U.S. national security strategy to deal with China in the coming weeks. Blinken spoke at a hearing at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
I will have an opportunity, I think, very soon in the coming weeks to speak publicly and in some detail about the strategy.
After more than a year since Biden took office, the administration has faced criticism from Republicans for lacking a formal strategy to deal with communist China. President Joe Biden is expected to visit Asia, including South Korea and Japan, in May. The lengths the Chinese Communist Party has gone to and will continue to go in order to subvert America's dominance on the world stage cannot be overstated. In order to truly understand the ruthless nature of the CCP and their subversive tactics, there's no better book to read than the 9 commentaries on the Chinese Communist Party, which was published by the Epoch Times. When it comes to following the CCP's dealings on American soil, one of the top minds on the subject is National Pulse lead investigative reporter Natalie Winters. Natalie Winters, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Natalie, when it comes to U.S.-China relations, post-pandemic, new administration, where do we stand right now? What is the temperature?
Well, I think it's very different than the last administration, and I think the best way to analyze and assess this is in terms of the personnel that we see going into the Biden administration. And I think a lot of the appointees, talking all the way up to the level of the CIA director, are people who have at some point in their career been either, I would say, contaminated or cross paths with a lot of Chinese Communist Party influence groups and have, as a result, peddled a very soft line on China. So I think when you look at the kind of anatomy of the Biden administration from that perspective, I think that's how you understand a lot of the policies that we're getting out of them, which I think is to say the least, pretty soft on China. I don't think there's an appetite to really hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable, at least for COVID-19. It seems like the foot has sort of been let off the brake, or the gas rather, on that aspect. But I think also too, more broadly, even when you take China-focused issues out of it, I think what you see going on in Afghanistan and just sort of the chaos that has unfolded across the world is something that the Chinese Communist Party is really embracing and probably the primary beneficiary of.
So, Natalie, when it comes to the CCP's long reach and their arm meddling in United States politics, culture, religion, how far does that go? You did sort of touch upon it there.
It goes, I think, way further than most people understand. The example that I gave of the CIA director, his name is Bill Burns. This is someone who used to chair a think tank called the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and while he was there, he oversaw millions of dollars in donations coming in from the China-United States Exchange Foundation, one of the premier foreign influence groups that's basically funded and bankrolled and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. They also appointed some Chinese Communist Party officials to the board of the think tank. So if this is the person who's being chosen to serve as the CIA director, I think that sort of tells you the level of compromise that goes on. Even another individual, his name is Thomas Zimmerman, who's actually Joe Biden's point person on personnel at the National Security Agency. He used to be a visiting fellow at the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, which may sound innocuous to most people, but this is a Chinese Communist Party controlled think tank that's actually been flagged and actually seen Americans indicted for selling confidential documents and secrets to for the purposes of serving as spies and working in the realm of espionage on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. So when compromise and this rot of Chinese Communist Party influence goes all the way to these three-letter intelligence agencies, I think it shows you how far we've come, because I can guarantee you if they're trying to compromise the CIA and the NSA, the DOJ, the DOD, the DOE, all these other departments have been compromised a very long time ago.
It's really unbelievable, and the facts are out there just how widespread this is. Another example I want to get your thoughts on is the Chinese Communist Party's meddling in our culture in terms of sending letters to performing arts venues throughout the country to prevent Shenyun Performing Arts from being able to perform just due to their China before communism message. How deep is this within our own culture, universities, things like that?
Well, I'm not surprised that the Chinese Communist Party is doing that, because if you think about it, they've gotten away with a lot worse in terms of bullying and really, I think, almost in some ways, persecuting, whether it's Hollywood and people making films, having them edit out certain scenes, or even all the way to universities. They've seen that, money speaks, and when they fund research at some of America's leading institutions, I can think of Harvard, Yale, the University of Chicago as some of the best examples of groups that have taken money from, again, that same foreign influence group, the China-United States Exchange Foundation, and you've seen policy papers come out of these institutions which are very soft on the Chinese Communist Party. One of my favorite stories is the Harvard Ash Center. This is a group that's housed at the Harvard Kennedy School, which is, of course, the training ground for the next generation of America's leaders. They take a lot of money from Chinese state-owned enterprises, and coincidentally, they put out a report, I think it was about 2 years ago, that actually insisted that the Chinese Communist Party was as popular as ever, and that their approval rating was in the high 90s, which that is, obviously propaganda. That's obviously false. But I think this is a perfect example of how the sort of compromise process works. So whether it's money or personnel and implanting them, they've seen it's really successful, right? You find the Achilles heel, you target that with money, with whatever, and it works. So I'm not surprised that they're trying to pressure a lot of these venues into canceling, the celebration of China before communism. And frankly, they're probably looking around and seeing that a lot of people on the American left have sort of used a similar tactic in terms of trying to silence speech that they disagree with. So it's not unheard of.
Natalie Winters, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Democrats met to discuss tackling rising gas prices and food prices. Representative Hakeem Jeffries addressed factors weighing down the Biden economy.
We are definitely going to act to try to address the geopolitical issues that relate to gas prices being where they are, act in terms of some of the supply chain challenges.
Jeffries said that nothing has been ruled in or out for lowering gas prices, but would not say that a proposed plan for a federal gas tax holiday is being moved forward. He did urge oil companies to lean in and do something about the supply and demand challenges. A bill banning President Biden's cancellation of student loan debt is being introduced by the GOP. Senate Minority Whip John Thune said as people return to the workforce after the pandemic, that it's time for borrowers to resume their obligation of repaying student debt, and that taxpayers and working families should not be responsible for bearing the costs of unpaid student loans. The bill being introduced would also put limits on pausing repayments. People with an income of 400% above the poverty line would be exempt from a pause.